So welcome back to Samuel, and I want, first of all, to reassure you that I have not been bribed, and this is not product placement for the new Amazon Prime series. Did you know this? Launching on the 27th of this month, The House of David. I have no idea whether that will be good or bad, whether it will be worth watching. Let me read to you a little bit of the blurb that goes with it. It says this: most everyone knows the story of David and Goliath. What makes Prime Video's dramatic new series, House of David, uniquely engaging is the way the directors modernize the 3,000-year-old tale. You worried? But here, this is the modernization. Viewers not only learn, for instance, about David's musicianship. You know, David was a musician. I think we knew that, so that's not that modern. But the fearless way he defeated a lion long before he toppled the most renowned giant in the world. So apparently lions, they're much more modern than kings and giants. So something's happening. More encouragingly, listen to this. So House of David, they said, is the origin story behind the biblical figure who became the most renowned and celebrated king of Israel. In addition to David's ascent, the series follows King Saul as the once mighty leader who descends and falls victim to his own pride. And that little sentence there, that is everything that we've been saying over all the chapters in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel that we've been saying. Well, not everything, nearly everything we've been saying. So King Saul, it's a story of his pride and that he descends because that is what God always does to the proud. And David ascends because he is humble. David is willing for God to be the real king, and David will just be his servant instead. So that really is, since Hannah's prayer in 1 Samuel 2 and then David's song about Saul and Jonathan, those have been the big themes through the whole book. And our next few months, I think probably we're picking the story up long after at least season 1 of the Amazon Prime thing will have ended. Because if you look at 8 verse 15, those verses, they're sort of end of season recap. And it's a way of saying everything is sorted now. David is king. He's completed his rise to glory. But here's where I would disagree with the Amazon series. See, we don't need to modernize this story. We particularly don't need to modernize the story by making Samuel more like Yoda, they said they've tried to do. We don't need to modernize it because already you and I are in this story. Prime is going to do that by making you David. It's normally the way we try and do that. Any story anywhere, try and make you the hero. They say this is about the journey of becoming who you were always meant to be. I don't think that's very helpful. That just makes this one more old story about someone whose life is actually nothing like mine at all. No, the Bible writer intends this story to be modern in every age of humanity because David is a prototype of Jesus. David is there to help show us the eternal king of humanity in all of the ages. It's to show us what we need, show us who Jesus could be. He is king, he's alive, so this is modern. So this morning's question, and it will run over several weeks, is all about Jesus. Question: would you actually want to be in his kingdom? Are you sure? Are you sure that you want to follow Jesus? If you're following Jesus, have you made the right decision? And we see the answers to those questions through the experience of a difficult test case, this man Mephibosheth. So look down at verse 6, we're on page 312, and he is Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul. And at that point, the Amazon Prime strapline becomes really interesting, doesn't it? This is about the journey of becoming who you were always meant to be, Mephibosheth was meant to be king. He is the grandson of the king. He is King Saul's last remaining heir. Is this a journey where Mephibosheth gets to be king? No. David is king now. That is not going to happen. And actually, you look at him more carefully, Mephibosheth has nothing going for him at all. Verse 8, he calls himself a dead dog. What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? And I think literally he means as in he is a dead man walking. Nobody, I think, has any doubt what is going to happen when the grandson of the old king is summoned to the palace of the new king. I think you would just assume David was lying. Bring him here and we know what's going to happen. If you want to distressingly lose your childhood innocence, then here's something you could Google this afternoon. Just Google how many monarchs killed a member of their own family. And the answer is all of them. Everyone, not just the ones we think are nasty, like Richard III. It's everyone you ever liked or cheered for or admired. It's Elizabeth I, as well as Henry VIII. It's Augustus, as well as Nero. Cleopatra, I learned this morning, it was her sister and both of her brothers, even though she'd married both of them. So this is normal. And the last grandson of the old king, he has nothing going for him. He is 100% threat and danger to the new king. Everybody knows that he needs to be got rid of. He's a dead dog. Except that Mephibosheth has one thing only going for him. I'd like you to turn back to 1 Samuel 20. Keep a finger where you are. Page 292 in our Bibles, 1 Samuel chapter 20. And this is a scene that I think Prime will mess up entirely. But there we go. So we're back when David was on the edge of disaster. David, he was a soldier at the king's court, then he did well. He married the king's daughter, but now the king Saul wants to kill him. And in chapter 20, David is hiding in a field so he can speak to his friend, the son of the king, Jonathan. So at this point, David has zero power because Jonathan is the son of the king and David is the dead dog. And Jonathan is the one who should be getting rid of the threat. Certainly that is what his father thinks. Get rid of this threat to your kingdom. But Jonathan instead decides to make an eternal covenant with David. So let me put just a few verses from chapter 20 up on the screen for you. Verse 15, Jonathan says, "Do not ever cut off your kindness from my family." And that word kindness, that's the key word through this chapter and actually the next one as well, chapter 10. Don't cut it off, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Just think about that. Who is Jonathan? Who are David's enemies? Jonathan is a believer. He believes that God is going to get rid of Saul, Jonathan's own father, his enemy. He believes that there's no way Jonathan is going to be king himself because God has chosen David. Jonathan believes that and he acts on his beliefs. So verse 16, Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. And skipping to the end of the chapter, he really gets it underlined, doesn't he? The Lord is witness, verse 42. Between you and me and between your descendants and my descendants forever. So Mephibosheth, the dead dog, has this one thing going for him. And it is that decades ago, David made a promise to his dad, a promise to be kind. But a lot has happened since then, hasn't it? Granddad Saul has spent year after year after year hunting David, trying to kill him. And then Saul is dead, Dad Jonathan is dead. In fact, Uncle Ishbosheth has just lost a 7-year civil war with David, and now he is dead as well. Blood has been spilt everywhere. And kings make promises like this all the time. Politicians make promises all the time. Nobody expects David to keep this promise. Remember, this morning's question is about Jesus. David is supposed to be a little bit like Jesus. Would you actually want to be in Jesus' kingdom? Are you sure you want to follow him? Have you made the right decision? And I've got 2 points from what David does. The first one, a dead dog is shown kindness. And then second, by the king of kindness. Chapter 9, 2 Samuel chapter 9. Come back to chapter 9. That is a chapter that you could enjoy over a couple of hours on a Sunday afternoon. We prayed in our psalm about meditating on the law of the Lord day and night. You could really spend some time in 2 Samuel chapter 9. Mephibosheth, he represents you and me. David is God's king. He represents Jesus. And this is a hard test case for reasons we've just laid out. Everything about David's self-interest should make him mistreat this boy. All he has is a promise of kindness, which, when you think about it, all we have from Jesus is a promise that he will be kind to us. Somehow, for some reason, we think that he will be kind to us, even though often we treat Jesus appallingly, and all of his self-interest, it goes the other way. So take this chapter home and read it line by line by line, and stop after each line and imagine how it feels to be Mephibosheth at each point. And then realize that the author is inviting us to feel the same. You're in the story. Let me just give you 1 or 2 more facts to take with you into the story when you do it. So the guy's name, Mephibosheth. It means from the mouth of shame. That's what that name literally means. It's probably a nickname. It's not the kind of name you actually give to your child. Probably a nickname that comes after the fall of the royal dynasty. Sounded probably like the name he was given when he was born. It says nothing but shame for this child of Saul's house. Then also notice in the story the emphasis on his disability. Did you see that? Verse 3. Lame in both feet, and then at the very end, verse 13, lame in both feet, just to make sure we haven't forgotten as the story ends. And if you want to know why and how, write down 2 Samuel 4, verse 4, which is where it happens. Happened on a significant day. It was the day when the news arrived at the house that Saul and Jonathan had lost the battle and had been killed. And on that day in the house, there was a 5-year-old boy called Mephi Baal, probably. He's in the house, this little boy, age 5. And he hears the news, Daddy is dead, and so is Granddad. And actually more than that, this means that the war has been lost. The enemies have won, and we need to run. We must flee for our lives. And 2 Samuel 4 says, so his nurse picked him up and fled. But as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. Then it says his name was from the mouth of shame. How's that for being born again? One day you are the crown prince of Israel. You live in a palace. Your father, your grandfather, they are the great men. The next day you are nobody, born again with a new name from the mouth of shame. And in the panic, it doesn't say, you wonder, did she fall on him? They're running down a big set of stairs. Did she drop him? And what was it quite that he broke in his legs or his ankles or his feet? How long was it on that agonizing, painful trip, running away? How long was it before he received any medical attention? you wonder what hurt most that day. Was it the injury? Was it the loss of his dad? Was it the loss of his future? He's a dead dog. He's a dead dog. And the lameness, I think, is emphasized for maybe a couple of different reasons. So it could be about usefulness. So his dad, Jonathan, was a great soldier. His grandfather, Saul the king, was a head taller than every other man in Israel. And Mephibosheth cannot offer that to his king. He bows down and says, I'm your servant. But in an Iron Age court, he cannot offer anything that David would be looking for. There's nothing in this for David. It could be about that. It could also be about access. So back in 2 Samuel 5, there's a bit of unfriendly banter between the people who live in Jerusalem and David, who is conquering it. And the banter, the slogan, is actually all about the lame and the blind. And so the sort of graffiti over Jerusalem became the lame will not enter the palace. I don't think it was ever actually sort of law or meant to be, but the sort of big no, Mephibosheth, this is not for you. You're not allowed in. But amazingly, David lets him in. And not just in, but all the way to his own table. So follow the story through this afternoon, some other time, and just feel the emotions. He's summoned, and surely he is expecting to be killed. So he arrives, he goes face down, verse 6, before the great king. And then David does not just give him his life. David goes all the way through normal kindness into stupid, ridiculous, dangerous, over-the-top love, doesn't he? Verse 7, do not be afraid, David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. How much kindness? I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. So he's making him a noble again. But it's a very stupid thing to do, isn't it? The one person with a really good claim to the throne, the grandson, the last remaining grandson of Saul, and he decides to make him rich and powerful. And then he says, you will always eat at my table. David wants to spend time with him, wants to see him every day, wants to sit next to him, wants to honor him. And look at the end of verse 11. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Do you remember the Amazon slogan? It's about the journey of becoming who you are always meant to be. Mephibosheth's story, there's no way for him to be king because Saul was rejected by God and David is king forever. But the kindness of God's king means that Mephibosheth climbs back into the chair that he lost when he was 5 years old. Isn't that amazing? Treated as the king's son again, purely because of a promise, purely because of love, purely because of grace. And so the line of Saul, of Benjamin, is not obliterated from the people of God. Mephibosheth, verse 12, has a son, and so the kindness of a king saves the people of God. It's actually very, very important. Is your king, is your ruler, are they kind, even in the hardest of test cases? Okay, that's the dead dog. Let's just think a little bit more about the king. Point 2, the king of kindness. You could do that as well. So spend a few hours thinking about Mephibosheth and then spend a little bit longer thinking about David as Jesus. So it is astonishing how good David is here. I think probably we said that 2 Samuel 7 was the high point of the book when we got there. But I now wonder whether actually it's chapter 9. Because it's not just about his power, it's about how he uses it. This is the king of kindness. But because we're going to be back next week and the week after, we do need to make sure that all of us know what kind of movie were watching what kind of story this is, because everyone reading 2 Samuel 9 for the first time, knows what happened in the end. So the story of David is not just season 1 on Amazon Prime. Season 2, maybe season 3 is where we are now. And that is all tragedy, the arc of the story we're in now. And the value of 2 Samuel 9 is that it shows us how good the king should be and all the things that he should be good at, the kind of king that we need. And God shows us that just before David's failure takes all of that away again. So the truth is, he is like Jesus in chapter 9. David is like Jesus in chapter 9. But in chapter 11, 2 weeks away for us, we are going to learn why we need Jesus, not any other human being, not any other one of the sinful human beings available at the time or now. That is a spoiler in both senses, isn't it? That is where the story is going. They would have known that, the first readers, but also in the sense that David's actions spoil everything from then on. But today we're in chapter 9. So again, learning about Jesus, just look at the ways that David is good, the specific things he does that is good. So House of David, I guess they're going to major on the warfare. You've got the sling and the spear and all the rest, but this majors on the kindness. Kindness is actually one of the key words of the whole Bible. The song we just sang, so loving kindness. That's that one word, sometimes translated loving faithfulness or covenant love. It's about a promise-keeping kind of love. So David, like Jesus, he is the king of that kind of love. There is nothing in this for David. He's just loving and kind and gracious and good. Also, though, notice he is into promise-keeping in an extraordinary way. We all know politicians don't keep promises. Part of us, we know that they can't. They have to say, optimistic things. At one point, things change. They have to go back on them. But Jesus keeps his promise, even when he really shouldn't. Even after everything that Saul did to him, even for dead dog people like me and like you. Then notice as well, where David is really good is with family. So Jonathan's son, he will treat him like he treated Jonathan. A promise to the father is a promise to the son. He said, me and my descendants forever, and he meant it. Notice as well, this is the kind of promise that God made to him. So 2 Samuel 7, is when God makes a big promise to David. So the first line there, the house of David, that is a house that God built. David comes from nowhere, comes from the field twice at least, and God makes him king. And then God says, I will make you and your children, I will make them sons in God's own house. And then he says, my kindness will never be taken away from you. We need a king who doesn't try and replace God, but we need a king who acts like God. That's what we said. David's humility is he is willing to act like God in every situation. So here, David shows us that as he treats his enemy's grandson in the same way that God had treated him. Kindness as a son with a secure place to build his family from. And I said 2 Samuel 9 is when he's like Jesus, 2 Samuel 11 is when he's not like Jesus, and we're not going to have time for it, but you understand you will want to check that in the New Testament. So often in the Old Testament, these characters, they move in and out of being like the Lord Jesus. So in the New Testament, what is Jesus like? Well, he is gentle and lowly to the dead dogs who he meets, will not break a bruised reed, will not snuff out the wick that is still glowing. He is faithful. His promises, every one he keeps. He is the good shepherd. David, the shepherd boy, who ends up ruling an empire. Jesus is consistent shepherd to his people. He shows love, Jesus, to those who offer him nothing. That is the Christian message. Would you actually want to be in Jesus' kingdom? Are you sure that you made the right decision? Well, I think with this open, can you think of anywhere else you would rather be? And 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel actually is all about that decision. I think that's where the whole two books are aimed. It's about the decision of who will be your God. So just to show you that, you might want to keep a finger in 2 Samuel, but turn up Psalm 2. Psalm 2 is page 543, and that's where we'll finish. Psalm 2, page 543. And just so you know that I'm not sponsored by Amazon Prime, let's just talk a bit about the BBC as well. So did you know that this week is the 40th anniversary of EastEnders? Did you know that? You picked that up? So some big things are happening. One of which, have you heard what they're asking us to do? I think this may be the worst thing that's ever happened on television, but I can't quite decide. So Denise Fox, she's caught in a love triangle. And on Thursday night this week, she will choose either Ravi or Jack. And 2 scripts have been written. Have you heard about this? And on Wednesday night, voting opens, and we can decide who she ends up with. Had you heard that? The Bible, in the same way, not quite the same way, the Bible is a love triangle. The story of God's people, the story of humanity, is a love triangle. Will you choose? Will you choose the God who made us and loves us? Or will you choose the gods that you've made for yourself, which is really a way of choosing your own self? And Psalm 1 that we read from at the beginning, that says choose who you listen to. Will you listen to God or listen to what your mates say? But it's Psalm 2 that I think lies across the application of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. It says, will you choose to rebel against God, or will you choose the king who he has set up? Will you choose David's son, choose Jesus? And I cannot really help you with the vote for Ravi or for Jack. I imagine they're both pretty terrible people, if I know anything about EastEnders. But I can help you. I think we can help each other with this choice about God. So there is 2 Samuel 7, the promise to David. And what I'm going to do line by line, I'm going to show you where that is in Psalm 2. So the Lord himself will establish a house for you. And in Psalm 2, God says, I have installed my king on Zion. 2 Samuel 7, I will be his father, he shall be my son. In Psalm 2, God says, you are my son, to the new Messiah. You are my son, today I've become your father. And then in 2 Samuel 7, there is the promise of kindness for the king. But let me show you how the psalm ends. Psalm 2 ends like this, the application. Therefore, you kings, be wise. Kiss the son, make peace with the son. That's what that means. Or he will be angry. But blessed are all who take refuge in him. Psalm 1, blessing. Psalm 2 ends in blessing. And is that not what Mephibosheth does? With terror, I expect, as he arrives in the room. But what the son of shame, the dead dog, discovers is that you really can trust this kind of king when you embrace him, kiss him, and take refuge in him. And this is the king, installed forever. His name is Jesus, God's son. And we are called, invited to trust him and to follow him.